Chapter 10, Marginalizing Heterodox Voices. When you look closely, you might notice that practicing free speech and questioning authority are, at this time, characterized in much of the press as controversial or irresponsible behaviors. The sharing of truthful information is under steady assault in the world today because it risks upending narratives that ruling powers and vested interests strive carefully to cultivate. This is why you will witness the principles of free speech and questioning authority being demonized in the media, and will see efforts to censor certain topics or voices. Of course, many people tolerate and even endorse such patterns because propaganda has convinced them that censoring and marginalizing certain voices or groups or topics is warranted. I would like to share a quotation from Shoghi Effendi that I believe is relevant. Quote, "Let us remember that at the very root of the cause lies the principle of the undoubted right of the individual to self-expression, his freedom to declare his conscience and set forth his views." Nevertheless, it is common practice today for power centers to marginalize and punish heterodox voices. Let me talk to you for a moment about how Phil Donahue's career ended. Older folks and middle-aged Americans like myself remember Phil Donahue. But for those that don't know him, Donahue was a popular talk show host for several decades and had a large audience that admired him. In 2003, when Donahue hosted a program at MSNBC, he criticized the plans of the United States government to go to war with Iraq, supposedly in retaliation for the 9/11 attacks. He interviewed military leaders that opposed the war. Donahue invited Israeli and Palestinian parents on his show who had lost children in prior armed conflicts to allow his audience to soberly consider the consequences of war. At the time, MSNBC was owned by General Electric, a major defense contractor. When it became apparent that Donahue, ignoring editorial suggestions, intended to continue speaking his mind on this topic, his show was canceled by the network. He was let go. It didn't matter that Donahue had been a popular talk show host for decades and had a large following that might tune in to see him on MSNBC, which could boost ratings and make advertisers happy. The concern of the network seemed to be that many audience members might agree with Donahue's perspective and possibly follow his lead in protesting the idea of rushing into a war without clear justification to do so. By practicing free speech in this way and questioning authority, Phil Donahue went against the narrative and he was silenced. Just a disclaimer, I'm not up on a soapbox taking a side here. Donahue's story, the story of what led up to the Iraq War, is more complex than my 1-minute treatment of it can adequately analyze. I'm simply trying to say that excluding some voices from a conversation is bound to have some counterproductive results. Remember that Abdu'l-Baha said, "From the clash of differing opinions comes the spark of truth." I think that allowing all opinions is critical for maintaining healthy discourse and action, whether that's between individuals or in a community or with institutions. When institutions or media label speech with terms such as misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation, you have to be careful. These terms are often used not in a sincere way, but instead to smear and stop inconvenient speech that bothers power centers. For example, early in the COVID era, Jay Bhattacharya, a Stanford professor, joined with others to propose a strategy of focused protection for the vulnerable, such as the elderly or chronically ill, while allowing others to live normally to achieve herd immunity, opposing the idea of widespread lockdowns and the closing of schools. This view was considered contrarian, according to media coverage at the time, and it led to accusations from some media outlets that Bhattacharya was spreading misinformation. Bhattacharya did not back down from the debate, despite media smears characterizing him as being part of a fringe minority. In one public discussion, he highlighted the historical importance of scientific dissent, citing the example of Francis Kelsey, a U.S. Food and Drug Administration scientist. In 1960, the William S. Merrill Company had proposed the use of the drug thalidomide for pregnant women to combat morning sickness. At the FDA, Dr. Kelsey was assigned to review the application. She was known for her meticulous approach. She noticed that the application lacked adequate evidence regarding the drug's safety. Despite being pressured by the Merrill Company to quickly approve the drug for use in the U.S., Kelsey did not back down. And thank God for that. It was later learned that thalidomide was linked to birth defects. Dr. Kelsey's efforts helped save countless American babies from the effects of thalidomide and also led to significant reforms in drug regulation. As a consequence, she was given the President's Award for Distinguished Federal Civilian Service by President John F. Kennedy.